The aspect I want to talk about now is actually, it's in the classical way of saying it, it's power. That one of the manifestations of the divine is power. I usually also talk about it in terms of energy because it's more practically accessible to us if we think about it that way. But it's also important for us to simply understand that even though material power seems significant, and often when we look at the world, we think that the government and the bureaucrats and the laws, and whether you have money or not, you think that all of these things are really where the power lies. But the power is always with the infinite. Just even looking out the window, you see the power manifesting, you know, that could just take everything down. In 1976, which was a long time ago, when Ananda was one community, in the middle of June, on a very hot summer day after 7 years of drought, half the property was consumed by flames in most of the houses. We only had 20-something houses at that point, but almost all of them burned to the ground. And it's an experience. We were in a rural area. It was basically a forest fire. Now what's happening is much worse, but that was very terrible. And it just swept over it in a matter of hours. It just turned things to ash. And one of the women whose house was burned down completely, her mother, she was talking to her mother who lived in another state. She says, well, certainly you got, your clothes out. No, Mother, I didn't. Well, what about the baby? Did you get the baby's things out? No, Mother, I didn't. Well, you must have gotten your mother. Go to the fireplace, pick up a handful of ashes. She said, that's what I have. The fire just swept through, and it just made mockery of our belief that we were in charge. Now, that's the natural world acting the way the natural world acts. That's why they won't let us have any flames in here. One little candle, mistreated. Well, there's a lot of cement here, but a lot of other things could be reduced to nothing. But we also have to understand that the power, that God is not gentle Jesus, meek and mild, that there is this force that can move through our lives, just changing everything. Whatever it might be, whatever it takes, there's this tremendous capability to destroy, if that's what's in our best interest, to restore, if that's what's in our best interest, to work miracles of health, to just take our life by disease. There's the power of life and death, the power of our destiny. Could this be happening outside the will of God? I want to finish that. I walked back into the hospital, and from that point, everything turned in a positive direction. It was like, oh, yeah, I was the one who had to learn something, wasn't I? It pushed me to the end. And when I learned it, then everything else was able to move forward. But that power is always there. Countless times in your life, if you pay attention, you'll begin to realize that somehow there was a power that came in, either to destroy or to rescue, but a power bigger than us. And that we have to also, how do I say it? We can't just be weak. We can't just be thinking if we're nice, it'll all work out. There's no guarantee at all. There's one exchange between Vivekananda. This is whether apocryphal or true. He was an extremely powerful person. He came to the United States. He was one of the first Indian swamis to come to the U.S. And the other one was another man we'll speak about at the end of this. But he was a very powerful man. And some very sort of soft-spoken man came and said, Swamiji, I want to realize God. Can you help me realize God? And Vivekananda supposedly said, can you lie? And, no, I would never tell a lie. Well, first you must learn to lie with so much skill that no one will know you're not telling the truth. Man looked horrified. And then he said, can you steal? No, sir, I would never steal. Well, you must become so clever at being a thief that you can have whatever you want and you'll never be caught. After you master those, come and talk to me about God. Now, apocryphal or true, I don't know, but here was the point of the story, which is we can't just drift our way into consciousness. The manifestation of God is powerful, huge, enormous power. We mustn't be afraid of that power. We mustn't be afraid of that power within ourselves. And also, what passes for piety is not piety, it's either fear or laziness. And that's what supposedly Vivekananda was saying. This was not a good man. He was just too lazy to pursue what he wanted. And he needed to get a little power running through him, and the power of desire combined with laziness would move him to become a thief. And once he had begun to have energy moving through him, powerfully moving through him, then he could redirect that energy. So it's notable that there are 8 manifestations, and not one of them is being nice. Right? We have to be wise, we have to be loving, we have to be joyful, so it's not likely that being abusive is going to be part of it, but you've got to have energy in what you're doing. And Swami would always prefer, somebody very energetic who was way off course than someone who didn't have enough energy for him even to correct. So also from a practical level, from the point of view of, because again, I'll say the word again, because often we are simply afraid to take a stand. We are afraid to risk. We are afraid to try. We are afraid to focus and try to make it happen. And so we paste over that, this idea of piety, like this. Yeah. There was this woman in our community, she was so funny. She just somehow decided that, this was way in the early years, she always dressed in white, she always carried one of Master's books, and she would, whenever things would become too raucous, she would just turn the pages of the book like this. She was so dull, she was so boring. And later it turned out to be just a complete facade. It was just, there was nothing behind it. It was pasted on from the outside and totally made up. So that's where energy and power have to be part of it. Swami Kriyananda, he was so energetic. He had so much power. He just ran us ragged. We were half his age, and it could take a dozen of us even to keep up. One night I was in his house in the evening. There were like 8 people in the house, and every one of them was working flat out on one of his projects. He just kept so much moving all the time, and he was powerful. And a lot of people didn't like that. They just ran away from that. Yogananda was enormously powerful. And so we just have to realize this is not for the faint of heart, but to speak of courage. But in a practical sense now, from the point of view of when we don't know what to do, we find the manifestation of the divine that is accessible to us. And this is where the word energy is also helpful here. Because sometimes you can't be loving, you're not very happy, but you can always put out energy. And maybe you can put out energy in a productive direction toward solving whatever the issue is, but you can always put out energy. You can always vacuum the rugs, you can always, wash the dishes. It's not always true, but oftentimes when I have a project that I just can't deal with, writing or organization or something like that, I cook. And when my housemate comes home, basically, and sees that I filled the refrigerator with soup and vegetables and salad, it's like almost always like bad day. And that's not always the case, but sometimes it is. I just cannot do anything, but I can always put out energy. And and energy has its own intelligence, and energy is a manifestation of God. And when you start moving energy is moving, and then it can be redirected. But if there's no energy moving, nothing will happen. Sometimes Swami writes in his leadership book, he says, you should make intelligent, considered decisions, but there's a certain point, he said, where any decision, short of outright madness, is how he puts it, is better than continued deliberation. You just have to move things forward. Just a second, I have a thought. You find it for a moment. So when we get in the habit of, in every situation, putting out energy and always putting out just a little more energy. That's the nice thing about it. Instead of putting out the least, always put out the most that you can. And I joke about it from the point of view of housework, because I don't like housework. And I don't mind going to sleep with a whole bunch of dirty dishes in the sink. I know some people can't do that. I sleep like a baby. It's not a problem to me. But because energy is a manifestation of the divine, sometimes I'll rinse them before I go to bed. Because we're putting out a little more than our worst. And what we're doing is we're training ourselves to respond to circumstances with energy. I know what I'd lost the thought. This woman came to me once, and she was having what I cheerfully called 100%er, which is every area of her life was falling to pieces. Relationship, money, work. I think her health was still okay, but I said, oh, she tells me this terrible tale of woe. I said, well, this is great. I said, it's complete clean slate. You're getting to start over. And she looked a little shocked and then thought, well, maybe this is joy, putting a little humor into the situation. But she had so many problems, she couldn't figure out what to do about any of it. And it was a lot of stuff. I said, what do you enjoy? I said, what can you think of to do that you have energy to do? She said, I love to ride my bike. I said, okay, every time you're beginning to sink down because you're contemplating these problems without a solution, just put them aside, go get on your bicycle and go ride your bike. And she kind of looked at me like I was crazy. I said, try it, trust me. I saw her about 2 weeks later, and she had just been following it. Instead of just having these around and around conversations, she would get on her bike and she'd go ride her bike. And after about 3 or 4 days of this, when she was riding her bike, she started having some good ideas about what to do. But if she had just sat there, but she just said, I can't put any energy directly toward the problem, but if I put out energy, I will be getting in tune with the expression of the divine, and then that will take me where I need to go. You understand? It is almost always. Of course, sometimes if the problem is that your physical body is collapsing, you might not feel you have any physical energy, but you can always put out mental energy. You can always put out spiritual energy. You can always pray. You can pray for others. You can sing. You can listen to music. Just, if you collapse to here, try to bring it to here. Just that much of a change, because the divine has power. And so it's not logical. It's not an A equals B. Don't think about it too much. Just do it. Because as soon as you do it, you begin to tune into a different frequency. And then everything follows from that. Okay?
Okay, this is a really fun chant, and it does have energy. It's called Swami Ram Tirtha's chant, or song, and it was written by Yogananda, and it's in honor of a great saint, Swami Ram Tirtha, who was just a blazing light. He only lived for 30-something years, but he was just a never-ending source of energy, just ever since he was a kid and walked out the door and manifested.
He came to America.
He came to America. He was one of the early ones that Asha mentioned.
Yeah.
So this chant, it's really strong and powerful. So it's also responsive. I'm going to sing each verse twice, and so you can listen if you don't have a chant book there, or if it's not in the chant book, I don't know. Swami Ram Tirtha's song. If it's not in there, just listen to the verse and repeat it every time, okay? Now, it may sound a little odd, some of the things that he talks about, but just think of it in terms of, if you are one with God, you have nothing to fear. So, world that's trying to impress me that you've got something that's stronger than I am, get out of my way, because I'm stronger than you. I'm united with the infinite. Okay, so. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. The world turns aside to make room for me. The world turns aside to make room for me. I come all blazing light, the shadows must flee. I come all blazing light, the shadows must flee. Hail, O ye ocean, divide up and part. Hail, O ye ocean, divide up and part. Or parched up and scorched up, be dried up, depart. Or parched up and scorched up, be dried up, depart. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. Beware, O ye mountains, stand not in my way. Beware, O ye mountains, stand not in my way. Your ribs will be shattered and tattered today. Your ribs will be shattered and tattered today. Friends and counselors, pray waste not your breath. Friends and counselors, pray waste not your breath. Take up my orders, devour up ye death. Take up my orders, devour up ye death. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. I ride on the tempest, astride on the gale. I ride on the tempest, astride on the gale. My gun is the lightning, my shots never fail. My gun is the lightning, my shots never fail. I chase as a huntsman, I eat as I seize. I chase as a huntsman, I eat as I seize. The trees and the mountains, the land and the seas. The trees and the mountains, the land and the seas. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. I hitch to my chariot the fates and the gods. I hitch to my chariot the fates and the gods. In the voice of thunder proclaim it abroad. In the voice of thunder proclaim it abroad. Howl, O ye winds, blow, bugles blow free. Howl, O ye winds, blow, bugles blow free. Liberty, 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 Om. Liberty, 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 Om. Okay, now that you have the idea, let's do it with energy and power. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. The world turns aside to make room for me. The world turns aside to make room for me. I come all blazing light, the shadows must flee. I come all blazing light, the shadows must flee. Hail, O ye ocean, divide up and part. Hail, O ye ocean, divide up and part. Or parched up and scorched up, be dried up, depart. Or parched up and scorched up, be dried up, depart. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. Beware, O ye mountains, stand not in my way. Beware, O ye mountains, stand not in my way. Your ribs will be shattered and tattered today. Your ribs will be shattered and tattered today. Friends and counselors, pray waste not your breath. Friends and counselors, pray waste not your breath. Take up my orders, devour up ye death. Take up my orders, devour up ye death. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. None can atone me, say, who would injure me. I ride on the tempest, astride on the gale. I ride on the tempest, astride on the gale. My gun is the lightning, my shots never fail. My gun is the lightning, lightning, my shots never fail. I chase as a huntsman, I eat as I seize. I chase as a huntsman, I eat as I seize. The trees and the mountains, the land and the seas. The trees and the mountains, the land and the seas. None can atone me, say who would injure me. None can atone me, say who would injure me. I hitch to my chariot the fates and the gods. I hitch to my chariot the fates and the gods. In the voice of thunder proclaim it abroad. In the voice of thunder proclaim it abroad. Howl, O ye winds, blow, bugles blow free. Howl, O ye winds, blow, bugles blow free. Liberty, 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 home. 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 Yes.
That song, the chant that Nambara sang and tried to persuade you all to sing with varying degrees of success. We don't, well, it depends on who's leading the music, but every so often we get into a period where everybody wants to sing that one. It's a good one to sing, you can see why. Ramatirtha was an extremely well-known sadhu, and he lived in India around, when did he come? Was it the 1800s or the late 1800s? And as you can tell from that song, he was a very powerful man, and he felt drawn to come from India to the United States. So he got on a boat, and he came, and they were just like docking in New York or somewhere like that, and he was dressed in traditional Indian clothes, and some American man just went up to him and said, who are you? Why are you here? And then he said, do you have any friends in America? And Ramatirtha said, yes, one. He said, well, who is it? He said, you. I mean, he just had come all the way across without any connection to anything. But he felt called to come, and he was fearless. What do I have to fear? He lived in tune with the Spirit. The Spirit told him to do this without a moment's hesitation. He just did. And then it turned out that man arranged his whole stay in the United States and undoubtedly became a disciple, although I didn't hear any of the rest of it. But I have one friend who, you. Just it's wonderful to hear stories like that, because it tells us what we could become. These are not myths and fairy tales. These are about individuals just like us. If they can do it, we can do it. And it helps make our world a lot bigger, because what happens is that people choose, a comfortable niche, and then are afraid to move out of it. And we can progress a little, but after a while, the heart just wants more, and wants to have power behind what we're doing. That's actually the right word. So we have to not be afraid of that power. And it's not, I know sometimes these things get distorted into kind of pop culture sort of ways of thinking. You are powerful and all this. No, not particularly. Most of us are pretty puny, but we can be bigger than we are. And also we have to just not be afraid. Everything is about fear. That's why St. John put it. It really, if you look at all of our hesitations, we're always afraid of something. Something bad will happen, we'll lose something that we want. And this is where perfect love casts out fear. Because it's if we love God, and let's put it the other way, when we begin to understand how profoundly we are loved by the divine, and that everything is happening for our own best interest, we become simply interested in it instead of afraid of it. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, God never gives us a challenge that is bigger than we can handle. And then she said, but sometimes I wish God didn't have such a high opinion of me. Which is a very honest statement, because sometimes what we're asked to do seems beyond us, but it wouldn't be asked of us if it wasn't exactly the right size, at least for us to grow into. And, all of this, the more we can just move through life, and this is how the masters move through life. Swami was very dynamic, and he was very active. He was not passive. He was always active, but he wasn't afraid. His intelligence was so startling to me, and because I like intelligence, it's my hobby. I enjoy just that kind of energy. But when I was first getting to know him and just realized how incredibly clear and creative his thinking was, I began to try to understand, what makes him this way. He actually never graduated from college, but just by a couple of months, he just lost interest and couldn't do it anymore, and became a disciple of Yogananda when he was 22. But he was extraordinarily well educated, just because he was. That's just what he did. But it wasn't information. And I finally understood when I went, a few of you knew him when he was older, but not many. But when he was younger, he had a posture that was exactly what some of the Indian stories, especially the Mahabharata, always make a point about Arjuna, the great hero of the Mahabharata, had this powerful bow. And when Arjuna became very discouraged at one point, he unstrung his bow. So what that actually represents is the string of the bow is the spine, where the divine energy goes, and the front of the bow is the front of the body. And Swami Kriyananda's posture, he wasn't heavyset at that time, but still his posture was, his spine was perfectly straight, and the front of his body was just a little bowed like that. But I realized it was the heart that was so powerful. Because the heart was he just led. He led his life from the heart forward. And you could sort of see it when you looked at the side of him, because he wasn't afraid. And even when people sit to meditate, we sort of say straighten the spine, which is kind of hard to do. People kind of try to straighten the spine. But what you're really wanting to do is you're wanting to open the heart. Because we pull our shoulders forward like this because we feel vulnerable here, isn't it? You pull it back like that. And sometimes it's even a little scary to just pull the shoulders back and let the heart shine forth. But because reason follows feeling, and Swami's feeling was not corrupted by needing things to be any way at all, he had one commitment. He just wanted to know what was true. He was totally unafraid. If it was true, it was true, and then we'll simply do what we need to do to adjust to that. And that's where the power comes from. And so Ramtirtha, who had a tremendous state of realization, meaning, no birth, no death, no caste have I, father, mother have I none. These are not renouncing these things, these are transcending it, realizing that I am the infinite spirit. We've lived countless incarnations, we've had so many wives and mothers and castes and births and deaths, but we finally realized that our identity is shifted from the limited to the eternal. This is what this is all about. And once we're walking like that, well, the life of Jesus is one of the most dramatic examples. The esoteric and now becoming common understanding was that the so-called lost years of Jesus were not lost at all, that Jesus went to India and to Egypt and studied with the esoteric masters. And he was in India for 18 years. There's a great deal of evidence of his sojourn there. But he had a different destiny to fulfill, so he came back. He came back to Israel for 3.5 years in order to be crucified. He knew what was going to happen. He walked in and challenged all that power and all that money and all that established corrupt priesthood. Everybody in it was Jews. It wasn't the Jews against Jesus. Everybody on both sides of the whole thing was all the Jews. It was a corrupt priesthood against a new teaching. And the new teaching was going to take away the power and the money of the corrupt group, so they had the power to extinguish him, seemingly. But he didn't have to come back to do that. He was a priest in India. He had a world there. But this is what I was born to do. For this hour was I born. You see, this is also, we have to remember, for this hour was I born. It's one of the most thrilling sentences in the Bible. You know, all of this is coming. You know, even now, legions of angels could rescue me. You know, should I ask to be freed? He says, no, for this hour was I born, you know, and then the trumpets start and the lights start flashing and the thunder and the lightning. But then here's the darndest thing about it. Every single one of us, for this hour was I born. We've spent so many incarnations having life experiences, moving us, inching us forward, piece by piece, from delusion to freedom, to get right to here. And this is exactly where we're meant to be. We were born and died countless times to stand right here, to take the very next step. And our destiny is no less glorious than Christ. He's just finished, we're in the middle, but our destiny is the same, our identity is the same. I and my Father are one. Be therefore perfect as our Father in heaven is perfect. Jesus says, that which I do, you shall do, and greater things. And he's not just being nice when he says those. He's just telling us. When Swami Kriyananda, he had a beard. Yogananda had him grow a beard because he looked very young and he was teaching people who were much older than him, and he thought a beard would help. And so, because people at that time in the 50s, in the 40s, did not grow beards as often as they did starting in the 60s, there was a tableau in a Masonic lodge, and they wanted Kriyananda to play the part of Jesus because he had a beard. And so basically all he did was, lean against a rock, as Swami described it, lean against a rock and sigh. It was not a play, it was just a tableau. Afterwards he came back, and Master asked him, well, how did it go? And Swami said, well, I'd much rather be like Jesus Christ rather than merely look like him because I have a beard. And you would have expected Master to say, well, aim for something more your own size. But instead, when Swami said, I'd rather be like Christ, Master just said very casually, oh, that will come. Just like that. Oh, that will come. And it wasn't only because he was an advanced soul, Swamiji was, but because that will come. And this is wisdom, my friends. This is wisdom to realize, and don't let any other of your mental citizens persuade you otherwise. We're all in this together. We will all get free. And it's just a question of just one foot in front of the other. People often ask me what the secret is, expecting some big story. And it's 2 words, don't quit. Just that's all. You might get discouraged for a while. You can sit down, you can lie down, you can have a discussion with whoever's going to answer you as to whether there's an option, and then at the end you'll just get up and start walking again. As one of my friends said, it's just not that easy to lay down and die. You can try it, but you'll get hungry. You'll get restless. Your phone will give you a notification and you'll want to know what's on it. Because our spirit won't let us. That's what we're working with. And so all that I'm trying to share with you today is just some practical ways. Put it in your quiver Because all you need is a way to persevere and not give up. Yogananda actually said, you only have to do 1% of what he taught to make profound spiritual progress. For most of my life, I thought he said 10%. Recently, I learned that it was just 1%. 1%. And then he said, but everybody takes a different 1%. That's why I have to teach so much. But there's also profound wisdom in that. Whatever resonates with you, whatever gives you the energy and the faith and the hope to keep on keeping on, that's your path. And then just build on that. And it doesn't matter, the last shall be first. It doesn't make any difference what it looks like to anyone else. For this hour were you born, and follow it through.